Hello friends, and welcome to chapter 2 of the percents. Okay, so yesterday or last lesson we had kind of a review on what a percent is and converting from percents to fractions to decimals and back, all three. Today I'm going to actually smush together two lessons. We're going to do just taking a percent of a number and estimating a percent, because I think we can cover both quite reasonably in the time that we have. So just a reminder that a percent is a ratio, which means a fraction of some number to 100. So that makes it really easy to change the percent to a fraction, because you can just put it over 100. So when we're taking a percent of a number, the problems that you're going to have right now will say something to the effect of, what is 5% of 300? Now, when we get a little bit later in the chapter, I'm going to explain how this is actually the percent equation. But what we're doing is we're solving for stuff that's already on the same side. What would be our variable is translates as the equal sign, and then we have 5% of means multiply and 300. So whenever we have the percent, and that's what we call the whole, all we have to do, you have two options. We can either change the percent to a fraction, in which case that would be 5 over 100. And again, of means multiply, so we're going to multiply that to 300. And if we write that as a fraction, over 1. Okay, if we do that, 100 goes into 300, and it basically just takes the zeros away, and 5 times 3 is 15. And that makes it so we don't even need a calculator sometimes, which is nice. So the first option is to change our percent to a fraction and do fraction multiplication. However, I know most of you do not enjoy fractions and probably would like to not have to use them. So the other option is, instead of changing the percent to a fraction, we can change the percent to a decimal. 5% is the same thing as 0.05, in which case we do 0.05 times 300. And you can do it on a calculator or you can do it on a piece of paper, and either way it does still come out to be 15. Which is nice. So pretty much that's the entirety of this lesson. So let's practice a couple more times. So we'll call that one 1. How about this time we'll do 25% of 180. Okay, so again, your two options. 25% is the same thing as 25 over 100. Or if we reduce that down, how many quarters are in a dollar? Well, that would be 1. So we can divide both of these by 25, right? So 1 over 4 of means multiply. So we would times that to 180 over 1. And 180, that's times divided by 4, comes out to be 45. So, because really if we multiply across, we get 180 over 4, and we do that division, it comes out to be 45. So that's how to do it, is if you change it to a fraction. If we change 25% to a decimal, 25% as a decimal is, we move the decimal place to the left 2 places, 0.25. So we do 0.25 times 180, and that should come out to be the same if I type the right numbers into the calculator, okay? So there we go. Either way, we end up with 45. Dun, 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 dun. I did that both ways. Okay, this works with percents that are bigger than 100%. Just know if you have a percent that's bigger than 100%, you're going to get more than the number you started out with. Okay, notice how all of these were smaller than the number we started out with, but if you have a percent that's more than 100%, you'll get something bigger. So the question is, what is 120% of I don't know. It didn't, we'll pick a number. 120% of 40. That sounds like fun. Cool. Okay, so again, we have two options. We can either change it to a fraction, so 120 over 100, and set that equal to, no, not set it equal, we're going to multiply, because that's what of means. Of means multiply. So times 40, we put that over 1. Okay, well, right now we can, well, for funsies, let's not do any pre-simplifying. Let's just go ahead and multiply that right out. 120 times 40 equals 4,800 over 100 times 1, which is 100. So the zeros are going to cancel out, and we end up with 48. Okay, and notice how that is bigger than the number that we started with. Okay, or we could change the 120 to the decimal version. 120% as a decimal is 1.2 or 1.20. So if we do 1.2 times 40, that should also be 48. And there we go. Okay, 48 either way. Now, let's be honest. Most of us change to a decimal rather than to a fraction. But I just wanted you to know that that is an option. And if the book, like, it doesn't specify which method to use, so go ahead and use whichever one feels more comfortable to you, okay? We can even do really small percents. We haven't done one of those yet. So less than 1%, so we could have 0.3% of 126, just for fun. Okay, so again, 0.3%, let's just go the decimal route on this one. We're going to move the decimal place over 2 places. It becomes 0.003 of means times 126. Okay, and if we do that on the calculator, times 126 comes out to be 0.378. So there you go. 0.3% of 126 is still a really small number. Okay, but that's basically how to take a percent of a number. Okay, when we get further along in the chapter, I'll show you how to have any two of the 3 of these, and we can figure out the third. It does get a little algebra-y, but I think you can handle it. Okay, the next section is on estimating. Okay, in this section, there's just some tricks that you can do to get kind of close, because let's be honest, even though we all have calculators with us most of the time now on our phones, we're too lazy to pull them out and actually use them. So being able to do a little mental math, a little estimating, is super useful. Okay, so some of the tricks that I use for estimating, to figure out 10%, well, really, this is to calculate it correctly, but you can also use it for estimating, is you can calculate 10% by just moving the decimal place over 1 to the left. Okay, so 10% of 62, where the decimal place is kind of at the end there. So 10% of 62 is the same thing as 6.2. We just move that decimal place over 1. Or 10% of 153, 10% means we just move that decimal place over 1 place. It's going to be 15.3. Okay, so if we're estimating, we can just round those two. 10% is almost 60 of that one. 10% is almost 15 of that one, or almost 6. If we round to the nearest whole number, okay? So 10% is like that 1%. Same idea, but we move the decimal place to the left. Okay, so 1% of 33 we move over 2 places, is 0.33. Or 1% of 432, again, we move over 2 places, would be 4.32. If we were estimating that, you could just estimate about 1% is about 4, rounding that, okay? Because estimating we want to be able to do in our head. So now if we have, using these 2 things that are pretty easy to estimate, pretty easy to do in our heads, we can make combinations of them by adding them together. So for example, if we want to estimate 20% of 1472, 20% is the same thing as 10% plus 10%. So we can calculate 10% by moving it over, and we can round a little bit. So I'd probably say 10% is about 140, right? If we move that decimal place over, and then I just want 2 of those, so about 280. 20% of 1472 is about 280. And we just need that about. That's all we need. Yeah, that works. Or if you want, you can even round this number up. This is even a little bit more technical than we need to be. We could always just do 20% of rounding this up to 15 and making that a whole number. So then 10% of 15 is 1.5, and we need 2 of those. And so that rounds it to 3. So again, estimating, as long as you're in the ballpark, your answer is correct. Okay? If you're going to estimate something like 42% of 120, we can actually round our estimate up. For 42% is kind of close to 50%. 50% is half. And so if we think about that, half of 120 would be 60. And then we can maybe say we want a little bit smaller than that. So we could do anywhere probably from, I don't know why I just wrote an 8. That was weird. So our estimate could be probably anywhere from 50 to 60, somewhere in there. And just for verification's sake, 0.42 times 120, the real answer is 50.4. So a guess between 50 and 60 is pretty on the nose on that one. Okay. There you go. We can also estimate more than 100%, so 122% of, say, 50. That means to get 100%, we want the whole thing. So we're going to have 50, and then 20% of 50 is going to be 2 tens, right? So 10% is 5, and I want 2 of those. So I'm going to add the 10 to that. So my estimate of 122% of 50 would be 60. That's a pretty decent guess. The actually calculated 1.22 times 50 gives us 61. So my estimate of 60 was pretty on point there. Okay, a couple other tricks just to add to your list. Just remember 50% is half, 25% is a quarter, or half of the half, and 75% is 3/4. Okay? Or you find the half and the half of the half, and then you add it to the half. But anyway, that's more technical than we need to be. Okay? So that is sections 2.1 and 2.2 on percents.